Divas, welcome back to A Deeper Dive. I am so excited this week to be here in the Capitol with House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. Oh, we go over all kinds of things. We talk about the 2024 elections. We talk about the legislative session, a possible special legislative session, and you find out what's on her 2025 legislative bingo card. See if you can guess. Stick with us. You don't want to miss it. House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell.
I'm born and raised in this state, and I feel like I have a lot to say about the future of our state. And I know the opportunities that I've been blessed to have in life, and it all started with the high quality public education.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Here we are. Divas. Oh my gosh, we've taken us on the road today, and I am in the office of House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your office during this busy committee week.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and we appreciate you coming here. It makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I was just kvetching about what a trek it is to get into the building, but we made it in here, and I schlepped all my stuff with me. So thank you. So we have a lot of ground to cover. We haven't spoken with you since before the elections. Let's start with that. Let's start with your caucus, because you were hoping to pick up some seats. That didn't happen. And then you had two defections right after the election. One of them, Susan Valdez, is from your county, Hillsborough County. What can you tell us about what happened with Hillary Cassell and Rep. Valdez?
Well, I guess I better start drinking this coffee faster.
Sorry.
We're just getting into it. Let's get into it.
You want to start
Happy
with...
New Year. No, it's fine.
I'm sorry.
It's
Happy
fine.
New Year.
Well,
I am sorry.
no,
I know you're
it's all
busy,
good.
so I want to cram it all.
It's all good. So election season, you're right. We worked very hard. I'm so proud of my members and the candidates that we had in our program. Everyone worked very hard despite record-breaking fundraising, despite having candidates in our targeted seats who overperformed the top of the ticket. It just wasn't enough to get us across the finish line and flip the 5 seats necessary to end the Republican supermajority, which honestly has been bad for government. So we had a lot of buy-in to the program, which I really appreciate. But when you're so far down ballot as a state house race, it's pretty tough to carry all of that weight on your shoulders. And so, in a Trump plus 14 environment, which is what we were in Florida, I mean, it's so highly unlikely that far down ballot you'll be able to.
You're really swimming upstream.
Yeah. But what I will tell you is that across the country, many Democratic caucuses and state legislatures lost seats.
Yeah.
And we actually came back with the same number that we started with at the end of the 22 cycle. We started with 22.
Okay.
We came back with 22. That's my silver lining. Now, you're right. We do have a couple of former members who left the caucus. And the way that I view that, I mean, these are two members who ran as Democrats, right? Like just this shy of 90, the other side of 90 days ago. Like, I don't even think it's been 90 days since the election.
A month after the election.
That's right. And so I guess if these members believed so strongly in the things that they said in their statements explaining their departures, if they believe so strongly in that, then wouldn't they have run as Republicans?
Is it transactional?
I don't know what's in anybody's hearts or their intention. You'll be surprised to learn that they don't quite consult the Democratic leader when they're about to defect and leave the party. But I would say, watch their votes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say watch what they run for next. I think that will tell us a lot about their intentions and who they are. I think more than anything, it's such a disappointment and betrayal to the voters. Like the folks who just elected them in as Democrats.
Unopposed, I think.
One was unopposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, one was unopposed. Yeah. And so I don't know how somebody does that to the voters.
As leader, do you feel like there's a hemorrhaging taking place? Do you feel like these were outliers? Or do you think there's something that you need to do to try to help keep your people in the caucus?
I mean,
it's not really usual for this to happen. especially not this close to an election.
It does strike me as strange as well, but I don't know what else we could do if people are inclined to leave. And so I did talk to some former leaders, like trying to have historical perspective and just people who have been in the process for longer. And the perspective that they gave me is that we're starting to see the culmination of all of these years of gerrymandering and Democrats getting pushed deeper and deeper into the minority. In that it's not even so much about this particular cycle as it is like this is just really difficult headwinds for Democrats to overcome in Florida. And so maybe people are reading those tea leaves and making decisions for whatever they think they should do for their future, including abandoning the party. But at the same time, I look at it and I think we're in the minority, but I also see opportunity. Because when I talk to people in the community, they're so fed up. They're so freaking fed up at their property insurance rates and that housing affordability is so difficult to find and healthcare and everything's getting more expensive. And I truly believe, like, let's watch and see what happens with the Trump administration. I don't think people understand tariffs. I don't think they understand that this could cause the cost of goods and services to be more expensive.
It certainly won't cause them to go down.
That's right. And even Trump has admitted this. He's like, no, those prices aren't going down. I'm like, man, you just stood at a podium
right.
and promised people you were going to help with the price of groceries. And then we've got this special session that's been called, and I'm sure we'll talk about that too.
Let's talk about, yeah.
Right. And so one of the issues that the governor said he wanted to focus on.
Well, before we talk about,
Sure.
Let's just talk a little process because our listeners, our divas, are pretty sophisticated. And so what happened, we're recording this on a Tuesday. What happened yesterday was the governor had a press conference and he said, we're having a special session and we're going to talk about all these things. And we're going to make it so that we can carry out President Trump's agenda. And plus we have other things, condos, election, ballot initiatives, and immigration. And then within hours, the Senate president and the House Speaker
said, what special session?
Basically said, go pound sand. And I think I'm putting it nicely when I say that. So that doesn't mean that we won't have a special session, but Republican leadership has been in such lockstep during your tenure over the past several years. Reading between the lines there, what does that say?
What's interesting? I don't even know if it's so much reading between the lines because I think you have Speaker and Danny Perez and a Senate President and Ben Albritton who have said that this is going to be a new day and that the legislature is going to be a legislature. And I think what happened yesterday is the find out part. The governor found out
right,
that they meant it.
Yeah.
And separation of powers is real. I think the governor maybe discovered what that meant yesterday.
Yeah. The last line was a little cryptic because it said, in the memo from the leader said, the governor has the authority to call special session. And I see here that he did issue a proclamation, but it's us, the legislature, that will actually, basically write the bills. And we'll decide where and when, I think, when and how, or where and when somehow that gets done. Kind of politically, from a strategic perspective, is it a game of chicken now? I mean, do they quietly negotiate behind the scenes and then come out singing Kumbaya? Then everybody looks like they're a winner? Or how do you move forward from here if you're them?
I think yesterday was such a departure from what we've seen over the past 6 years, as you mentioned, that it's leading me to believe that anything is possible. So yes, it's possible that they work it out and they present a united front. I think it's also possible that the legislative leadership does not back down. And there are procedural mechanisms that they could use. For example, they could gavel in and gavel out.
Yeah.
Right? The governor could then call us back. Like, who knows? This could go on for a really long time.
Right.
So I think we're in unprecedented territory, at least with respect to this governor's administration. And I don't know what's going to happen. What I think is likely is that, they've got a little time to figure it out. So let's see what happens.
Couple of weeks, and that was the 1 week off in January where you weren't going to have committee meetings. And I mentioned I was with 3 legislators, Democrats, yesterday when this announcement came out, and they all had appointments and town halls and events in the district that they had planned on doing. So I think people aren't really happy about the timing of it because you're not going to be here in Tallahassee anyway.
That's correct. Even yesterday, I canceled a town hall because...
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Once we found out the special session, I just thought it'd be fair to the folks that were hosting us. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, it's off. Well, wait a minute, it's on. It's creating all this uncertainty. And you're right. We have important work to do back in the district. But the other thing, talking about process, I listened to the governor's press conference yesterday, and there wasn't anything that he mentioned, in my opinion, that we couldn't address during regular session.
That's what they said in the... I think they did say we will address these things in the regular session.
They did, but I said it first.
You said... Yay, you.
I know. I'm glad we're all in agreement on that anyway, right? Because
not a lot, but
but you know how it is during a special session. Things are so rushed.
Well, they're done ahead of time, which was was so shocking about this, because usually there's a deal and then the the session is held and they're working out they're ironing out the final details, but you're in and you're out and the cake is baked by the time you gavel in. Right.
Right. And I don't think that's right, particularly on issues as big as condo reform, to not hear from stakeholders. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that's how we got that bad property insurance bill during a special session a couple years ago that gave like $3 billion to the property insurance industry. No relief to homeowners. And yes, we need a thriving property insurance market, which means we need to have a healthy reinsurance market. That's just not the way to make good policy. You shouldn't be afraid of feedback from the people who would be most impacted by that policy.
Right.
And no one party has a monopoly on all the good ideas. So let's have some real conversations.
Well, for example, the Senate, I'm attending a Senate Regulated Industries Committee meeting this afternoon, and they're workshopping condo issues today, which I guess, there conceivably could be something, it could be crafted as a result of that before this special session at the end of the month. Do you want to talk about some of the issues, or do you want to talk about some of your priorities? I feel bad now that I barged in without giving you I didn't ease in. I was so focused on other things, so I apologize.
It's okay. I'm a Democrat. Yeah. I'm used to it.
You're used to getting railroaded.
Yeah, you just listen. You just take the punches and you keep moving. I'm pretty tough.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of these issues that were brought up yesterday.
Yes, let's do that. Let's start with condos. You have condos in Hillsborough County. I don't know, in your district, do you have a lot of condos?
I don't have a ton of condos in my district, but yeah, I feel like condos are everywhere. We certainly have a lot of them in Tampa Bay. This is an example of why generally it's not a good idea to kick a can down the road, because now people are left with these condo associations are left with all these repairs they need to make and upgrades they need to make. And condo owners are getting hit with assessments that they can't afford. And you've got folks who are on fixed income. And one of my members who's down in South Florida shared with me a pretty sad story about one of her constituents who was elderly and on a fixed income and could not afford the lofty assessment. And it came to a situation where there was some self-harm involved. This is hitting people. It's real lives that are being impacted. And so that's what I mean, right? Like, we need to really hear from the stakeholders. We should hear from our constituents on this, from the people on this. We should really have this policymaking process in the sunshine. And that's what I worry about with the special session. Like you said, deals get cut, and that's kind of it. And that's not the best way to make policy. Especially
one of the issues with the condos that I find very interesting. People who I know who live in condos are complaining about this or mentioning this to me, that, why would I, a 60-year-old person, want to spend the money for a roof repair 30 years from now? Like, why is that my responsibility? And we're talking about these milestone inspections, and then they have to put the money in reserves to be able to handle these high dollar repairs down the road. That makes kind of sense, doesn't it?
If I'm somebody at retirement age and I'm on a fixed income, I could imagine thinking and feeling that way. But this is what I mean. Like, you can't it just feels very unrealistic to drop all of this on people's heads all at once, when in reality we should have been looking at ways to have smart development and smart growth and making sure that these inspections were taking place, right? Like a little more oversight. Regulation doesn't always have to be a bad word. I believe in a smart regulatory footprint that's not overbearing. So maybe we should have had more regulation on what was going on with these condos.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the legislature allowed the condo associations to waive doing those repairs, to waive those things. That is, the onus kind of comes back to the legislature long before you ever got here. Let's move on to the immigration. I mean, I was here. You probably were in law school, maybe. Maybe not even when they passed the Dreamers Bill.
Oh my gosh, I'm so amazed at how young you think I am. Thank you so much. Yeah, sure, I was in law school.
Well, when you get to be my age, you feel like everybody was, that was a Republican priority for former House Speaker Will Weatherford. And I remember listening to those kids coming up and the families, and that was a very poignant moment in legislative history. I think that the Republicans got behind this, allowing kids who were not born in the country, who were brought into the country by their parents or by others in some cases, who had attended school for at least 3 years, to get in-state tuition. I guess that's going to go away. What are your thoughts on that?
So I wasn't in law school.
Okay.
I was practicing law.
Okay.
And I can remember attending a ceremony for what I remember it to be was the first Dreamer who was sworn into the Florida bar.
I think they had to make a special law for him.
To allow that?
Yes.
Is that what happened?
Yes. Okay. Sandy Dallenbert helped with that. Yeah.
Wow.
See, because I was here for that.
You were here for that. That young man and I actually shared a teacher in common growing up. And in any event, I just remember being so moved by it. And even though I wasn't in the legislative process, then I thought, this makes so much sense. Like, look at this young man, listen to his story. He's about to completely transform his family's trajectory, his entire family's trajectory, not just impacting this generation, but future generations to come. What a smart investment. And now fast forward, here I am sitting in the legislature and listening to the governor yesterday. It was his own lieutenant governor who helped spearhead this in the legislature, right? Lieutenant Governor Nunez. And it's one of these situations where I don't know if Floridians' values and principles around this issue actually square with the national narrative. Because in Florida, we've for a long time invested in these young people, and don't we want a return on that investment? I mean, we have workforce shortages. So are we really gonna kind of like wipe out a significant part of the workforce? And the governor's languaging yesterday was troubling to me. He mentioned the Florida Guard, that maybe the Florida Guard could be involved. What does this mean? Is this forcible removal of students from colleges and universities? Is this breaking up families? And immigration is a big issue. It's a big system, but it is a federal problem. It is. And it just seems to me this governor continues to want to insert himself in this conversation and feed red meat to his base, but we don't want to. Yes, we want our community safe. Yes, we want the system fixed in a bipartisan way, but we also don't want to undercut Florida's economy. And in an election where people were talking about things like the cost of eggs.
I know. Eggs, milk, and gas.
Listen, eggs are not cheap.
No, they're not.
Right now. If you wipe out a significant portion of Florida's workforce in terms of the immigrant labor force, that's only going to cause the price of eggs to go up. It's going to cause the price of groceries to go up. So every culture war has a built-in economic cost, which I don't think people necessarily think about. And this, what the governor's proposing, could have a huge one.
But these are children, too, who did, much of the time. I mean, what if we lowered the age? What if we, they're not going to do this, but I was thinking, okay, part of the narrative is they come over, people come over as young people, are not brought over by their parents. They're brought over as young people just so that they can get free stuff from the United States. I've been in some of these countries like Guatemala. That's not been my experience, but we're not giving them free college. It's not like we're saying these dreamers get free college. They get in-state tuition, right? Isn't that part of what the benefit is that will go away?
That is one of the benefits that will go away. And
maybe bright futures.
I was about to say it could be bright futures.
You're right. So, you could eliminate bright futures. I don't know why you would.
You paused when you said they.
Yeah, I did. I did, yes.
I love that you did that.
Yes.
Because it was a reminder.
I hate that I said it in the first place.
That's beautiful because it's a reminder that we tend to rise people, if I can make that an action verb.
Yes.
And these are our neighbors. These are people who have been here.
Yeah.
These are young people, like you mentioned, who were brought here through no fault of their own, and they have contributed. They've played on sports teams.
I was just going to say that. Yes, they're on your Chibo.
They're bagging your groceries at the grocery store, or serving you when you go through the drive-through, or you buy something at the mall. This is not, I don't know what people might have in their head, but I would say that this policy is fear-driven.
Mm.
And if we could just step back from that for a moment and look at fact and think about the reality of the thing and the situation that we're in. Florida's economy is based on 3 pillars, right? Tourism, agriculture, and construction. Construction, agriculture, and tourism. If you eliminate or significantly reduce the immigrant workforce, we will be in a world of hurt economically.
All 3 sectors.
All 3 sectors. Let's pause and let's think about what we're doing.
Do you think they will?
I don't know. But I say
they, I mean the Republicans who have super majorities in both chambers and control the governor's office.
I actually do hope that they would, because I think there are still people here in this process who are elected either as senators or representatives who were around when that legislation was passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we need to take a hard look and we need to pause.
We'll be right back with House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. The news in haikus, divas, the news in haikus. Here we are recording this in the Capitol. This week's submission came from our special guest, House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. Thank you so much, Leader, for this one. Special session call. Leadership does not agree. What will happen now? Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs, or you can send them to podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back with House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. The ballot initiative process, do you have thoughts about that? Both measures went down. The abortion would have enshrined the right to abortion in the Constitution, mm-hmm. and others would have allowed recreational marijuana. The governor took unprecedented action to use state resources and the power of the bully pulpit to campaign against those. But apparently there was so much fraud that we need to come back and do a ballot initiative. The legislature has put a lot of restrictions on that mm-hmm. process. There's no details about what it is that he's talking about. Do you have thoughts about it?
I have so many thoughts. The first of which, that I thought it was wholly inappropriate for the governor to use state dollars, taxpayer dollars, our hard-earned dollars, to fight those ballot initiatives, particularly when we've had some economic projections for the state that suggest that there's going to have to be some belt tightening. So you mean to tell me that defeating those amendments was a priority in a season where we had catastrophic hurricane losses? Like, just get out of here with that. Like, it was completely political maneuvering. The second thing is, I know that the ballot measures were defeated, but I don't know how the governor can really claim victory when an overwhelming majority of Floridians voted in favor of both amendments. It's like, what's the victory? That you suppress people's stories, that you overrode the will of the voters. And in my 6 years, I've watched my colleagues across the aisle try to pass legislation to raise the threshold to 66%. And it just seems to me they're taking away the voice of the people, and they're continually suppressing the voice of the people because they don't truly want to hear from the people. At least this governor doesn't. And I think it's wrong. And I think the ballot initiative process is very important in Florida, particularly when you have a legislature that is dominated by one party, where the districts have been gerrymandered, like to the fullest extent. And so it just it creates this cycle, this feedback loop where it just reaffirms their dominance. But I don't actually think it's grounded always in reality. And then they do things like this, like spend taxpayer dollars to defeat these ballot initiatives. I mean, they just won't allow for a fair fight.
Given what you just said about the way that the system is structured now, the Republicans are able to keep pushing through legislation that fits their needs and what they think is best for either their constituents or for the state or for whoever's a contributor or whatever their rationale is. What keeps you going? You're kind of like Sisyphus,
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like that?
Oh, man. Yeah, what keeps me going? I mean, I'm born and raised in this state, and I feel like I have a lot to say about the future of our state. And I know the opportunities that I've been blessed to have in life. And it all started with the high quality public education, right? It started with, my dad having a good job. He worked with Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. We all know. My mom was a public school teacher. Like, there's just a lot of my origin story that is grounded in Florida. And I want every kid to have that same opportunity. And I have young people in my family. I have young people around me. I have young people on my staff. And I just want them to be able to have a good future too. And that keeps me going. I know we've got more work to do. I think about my nephew. I have a nephew who is 17, and he's just such a smart young man. He's a great athlete, and he's really tall. Man, he just shot up like a tree. So tall. The thought that he could be perceived as a threat just for walking down the sidewalk doesn't sit well with me.
We've talked about this before.
We've talked about that. That's a big part of my why. Like, I know there's more work to do to help make our state as fair as possible, as, providing as many opportunities to people as possible. And folks don't really want handouts. It's not about that. It's just like, help give people a good start and then get out of the way.
In your time in the legislature, you've been here how many years now?
6 years.
6 years, yes, you've mentioned it. In your time in the legislature, do you think you've gotten closer to that goal or farther away from it?
You know what it is? It ebbs and flows. So I remember in 2021, after the murder of George Floyd and all the protests, there was that horrible protester bill that passed, HB1. But that also was the same year we got a police reform bill passed unanimously. And I saw through that process, because I worked directly with the speaker on that. And it didn't go as far as some members of my caucus wanted, but it went further than some of the members of the majority wanted. And that's how I knew we had a good product, like a good start. Like, I've seen glimpses of where it can actually help and move the needle. Like, we were able to get resources for our historically Black colleges and universities for campus safety and school hardening. You will remember that shooting in Jacksonville a year or two ago.
Yes.
The whole incident started on a historically Black college, and the gunman had swastikas on his gun, and I see all that hatred connected, right? Like the anti-Semitism and just the racism and all of these things. And anyway, doing what we could for those schools. Like, I guess, I do see glimpses of that. There are ways that I feel like we have moved closer to it, and I guess that keeps me going for that next opportunity where we can move the needle just a little bit more.
With that said, then, what are your priorities? What are you hoping to accomplish or block? And procedurally, is there, maybe you can tell us what options are available to you all now in the super minority? And what are you hoping that you can work on together in a bipartisan way?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. This session also feels a little different in that legislative leadership has not articulated their priorities yet. Had you picked up on that too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, well, vague. We know that President Albritton wants to help agriculture somehow. So I think that we're going to see some, and in fact, that's in the call, right? The governor's call, something to help agriculture post Helene and Milton. So, but I haven't seen any specifics from either one of them. No.
It's a little different because usually you see legislative leadership bills filed very early. So I'm still waiting to see what the tone of this legislative session is going to be. But in our caucus, we believe every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And our platform will continue to center on that. So we'll push for lower insurance costs for homeowners. I'm sure we'll have our insurance legislation. We always are big proponents of affordable housing and investing in that, of transparency and how public school dollars are spent, particularly now, or I should say public dollars are spent for schools, particularly now that we've had major expansion of the voucher program. We push for safety in our communities. I'm talking like universal background checks and safe storage laws, policies that a supermajority of Americans agree with and want, regardless of policy. So we'll be championing those sorts of values that would help people lead healthier, more prosperous, safer lives. Oh, lowering healthcare costs. I can't believe I left that out of my mind. We had a great expansion or extension of kid care last year.
Oh, right.
With Representative Robin Bartleman of our caucus really leading the way on that to make sure that more kids can have access to healthcare. So there are good things, I think, on the horizon.
I wanted to go back to Hillsborough and Pinellas got hit pretty hard during Milton and Helene. Was your district impacted, or do you know how the recovery is going down there?
In my district, we're a little further north, so we had a lot of like tree damage, or folks had damage to their roofs and things like that, but it wasn't anything like what we saw in areas south of us.
Right.
There were even parts of North Tampa, though, that were dramatically flooded. Parts of the district that I used to represent before redistricting that never should have flooded. Like, they're not in flood zones. They're pretty far north. And that was awful. And then we actually went over to Pinellas County to help a couple of our members over there. Yeah, cleaning out homes and hauling off debris, taking water and supplies to neighbors. So we were able to really witness devastation up close and personal, and people were really going through it. So yeah, the state, we do need to provide whatever relief these communities need. I would agree with that.
Can you make some news today? There's talk about you running for governor in 2 years, or attorney general, or state senate. You're gonna can you make some news? And she's laughing. Her eyes are popping out of her head too, listeners.
I'm laughing because this week I've been told that I'm running for governor, that I should run for attorney general, that I'm running for U.S. Senate, that I'm running for state senate, and that I'm running for mayor.
Oh, I missed two. I only hit 3 of those 5.
I'm like, all at the same time. That's funny. That is, people are funny. No, I guess what I would say is I do love our state. I do love being in this public service role. I feel like it's the best thing I've ever done. Right now, though, I'm just so focused on leading my caucus because it's been a tough election. It's been a shaky time, and we have a lot of work to do. Like we do not have the luxury of being distracted and not doing the will of the people. And as for my personal future and plans, I'll figure it out. I'm giving myself that space to think about it, and I'm very honored that there are folks in the process, but then also in my community back home who believe in me and who believe that I've done a good job and want to see me continue on in some capacity. And that's very encouraging to me. And it's also kind of broadened my horizons in terms of how I think of some of these opportunities. So
stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, I think. I have a couple of questions. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this with me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
I feel the same.
I have a fun question, but first, I know you're a dad joke person, and I always am sending you dad jokes.
We use them too.
Do you?
We do. We use them in our caucus meetings.
I'm on a dad joke Slack, so I get I get them. Do you have a dad joke for us today?
I mean, only if I asked you, like, why are elevator jokes so funny?
Because they give you a lift.
That's awesome. I was going to say because they work on so many levels.
Oh, so much better. So much better. Okay. So going into the 2025 legislative session, what are 3 things that are on your bingo card? What are 3 things that are on your legislative bingo card?
Girl, I think yesterday showed us we could just rip that bingo card up because I did not have a public feud between legislative leadership and the governor on my bingo card. What's on my bingo card? So first, I do think there will be meaningful condo legislation. I tend to think it will come through the regular legislative process, though. So
Okay.
Condo legislation, regular process. I do think that there will be belt tightening, and I think we should all buckle up for that with respect to the budget. I think there are going to be significant cuts, but I hope that they're not so severe that they impact the quality of services that both the state and local agencies and nonprofits are able to provide to the people.
Okay, so belt tightening, condos.
And third, I would just say the unexpected, because and I know that's like wide open, but I think that yesterday showed us that this whole situation that we're watching with respect to special session is showing us that this is going to be a different type of session. It's going to be different. The relationship between legislative leadership and the governor is changing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to be...
So question mark.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Question mark is on
Do you
my
think
bingo
it's
card.
good, or do you think it's bad, or do you think it's indifferent to see that kind of tension?
I think procedurally it's good because separation of powers matters and there should be push and pull. And we saw a complete breakdown and failure in that infrastructure. I think most notably during the redistricting process, where the legislature was cautious, didn't want to run afoul of state and federal law, passed maps that were not great, but probably legal. And then the governor inserted himself, drew his own map, honey, drew his own map. and
they took it.
And they took it. I remember being on the floor, we were debating, and the governor tweeted, "I'll veto anything y'all pass." We passed it anyway, and he vetoed it. That was a complete breakdown of separation of powers. So yeah, I do think that tension it's good. It's good to have it back. Yeah. Substantively, I don't know, because I don't really know how much they disagree over, right? They probably want the same policies, and so that's not the best.
They need a little Aretha Franklin, right? Respect.
Yeah, they do.
I think that's really what it was about more.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, you don't be telling us what to do.
Right. Yeah, the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
I can understand that. I can respect that.
Yeah. You know, I had one last question, I think. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first ran for office?
Oh my gosh. You are going to give Oprah a run for her money. That is totally a question she would ask. What do I wish I knew?
Did you all hear that? Divas, did you hear that? She just called me Florida's Oprah, but I believe.
That's what I heard. Because it's so much.
I mean, maybe you can think of it in this terms. What advice would you give to a freshman of either party that, you know, somebody could have given you that might have saved you kind of the school of hard knocks way of learning?
Some of the best advice that I got, this is super insider stuff, but that if you want to pass a bill, worry about it. My floor leader, Rep. Mike Gottlieb, always says that if you want to pass a bill, you got to worry about it. You got to hustle. You got to build the relationships. You got to work it. You got to work your bill. And, you know, the most beautiful thing in the world, I think, is when you can get to a committee meeting and have no questions on your bill because you've worked that hard to answer them all ahead of time.
Right.
The realities of the process, things move really fast. I feel like there's less and less time to have those sit-down meetings with people in person. But when you can do that with your colleagues to chat, I think that's good. There's no substitute for that. But in terms of when I was running for office, like if there's something that I wish that I knew, it was just how really awesome and wonderful the process is. There are times where I wish I would have run for office much sooner.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising to me.
Well, it was in my heart for a long time. Honestly, since I was a teenager, I did Florida Girl State, and I came up here. I was governor of Girl State. It was amazing. So it was always an idea in the back of my head, but I just pushed it to the back and just kept it on the back burner. But I have found that even with all of the challenges, even when being in the minority, even when the odds are stacked against us, like being able to stand up for my principles, to being able to stand up for the people of Florida. And sometimes if that means you're the only one who's standing in the arena and fighting for what you believe, it's so worth it. I wish I'd done it sooner. And so I'd say to people, if it's in your heart, really do it. Do your homework, like look into doing it. I'm not telling you to tilt at windmills, but I'm telling you, if it's in your heart, look and see if there's a way that you can figure out a pathway to public service, because it's awesome.
Leader Fentrice Driskell, Democratic leader, minority leader in the Florida House, thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.